Is crowding together during a deadly pandemic really the best way to get that message across? Healthcare workers sure didn't think so. Oregon's 86-year-old non-unanimous jury law looks like it's dead, thanks to the Supreme Court. So what does that mean for people in prison who got convicted that way? And how did it even become a law in the first place? Let's revisit coronavirus testing, because last we checked, Oregon still had a lot of catching up to do. And Blazers fans are reliving the pain of passing on one of, if not the, greatest of all time. Here's the story.
Man, I love that graphic. Hey, everybody. Welcome to The Story without Dan Haggerty, as you might have seen. He is taking a well-deserved day off, and we're happy to give it to him. I'm Maggie Vespa, and it has been a month since I've physically been inside this space. So I'm going to be very real with you. I am way too excited to see humans, albeit from a safe distance. I scared my coworkers, though, because all this time, like so many of you, I've been working from home and growing way too attached to this guy. Seriously. I bought him off Amazon. It's not weird, and I will not be judged by you or society. In fact, this is actual footage of me saying goodbye to him today.
Wilson! Wilson! I'm sorry! I'm sorry, Wilson!
Okay, so I just got word that was a little too weird, and Dan will be back tomorrow. But hey, I'm at the wheel tonight. So in all seriousness, it's still obviously The Story. We still want to hear from you. Reach out on social media. My pages are great. Our team is still checking Dan's too. And on Twitter, use the hashtag HeyDan. We read everything with that hashtag. So let's get started, because first up tonight, something that got a lot of people talking over the weekend. You see this? Protests to end stay-at-home orders and reopen the economy have started popping up at state capitals across the country. Today, we saw them in Pennsylvania and Arizona. Over the weekend, it happened in Washington. That video right there is out of Olympia. And then these photos shared on Twitter really set the debate on fire. Healthcare workers showed up to one of these protests in Denver and stood in front of people's cars, refusing to let them go by. These images, by the way, taken by photojournalist Allison McLaren. And I posted those in particular on my Facebook page, and people came out full force, both sides. This pandemic, of course, is deadly. And scientists say the more we isolate and stay distant, the fewer people we end up killing. Plain and simple. At the same time, our economy is tanked. Unemployment numbers are through the roof, and people are afraid about affording food, rent, and other basics. And officials say we have to wait for several factors to fall into place, one of them being testing, making that widely available. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But, in the meantime, it's really easy to think that scenes like this mean that America's overall take on this pandemic and how we handle it is shifting. But a new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll shows close to 60% of Americans fear that we will reopen the economy too soon. So that brings us to something that we think is worth your time tonight. And that's today's episode of the New York Times podcast, The Daily, where they explore the issue of the hammer and the dance. If you haven't heard of that, the hammer being stay-at-home orders that fall into place like a hammer if and when infection and death rates spike. The dance being the slow sort of stop-start progression that eases restrictions a little bit at a time. And by the way, one of those protests is set to take place at Oregon's Capitol building in a couple of weeks. We'll keep you posted. So in the meantime, what would it take, to open things back up? Well, according to the White House, obviously, it would take testing.
We believe we have the testing today around the country that would allow any state in America to move into phase one if they've met the other criteria, 14 days of consistent declines and strong hospital capacity so that the system would not be overwhelmed in the event of a flare-up.
So here in Oregon, Governor Brown said she wants 15,000 tests a week before she's kind of comfortable opening things back up. But here's the thing. It turns out Oregon physically, it seems, has enough tests on hand to make that happen now. So we're going to bring in Pat Doris. I guess the obvious question, how many tests do we have at this point?
Well, it was fascinating figuring out today. Turns out we have probably as much as 18,000 tests available per week. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of them not being used each week.
Okay, so then people sitting at home saying, okay, so we could do this now. So why aren't we doing it now? What is the disconnect there? What do we know about that?
Well, when I asked the doctors why do you have unused tests? I mean, it's 2,000 or 3,000 for Legacy, Providence, OHSU. Each of those have that many, and they think that it's because people have heard that the tests are so hard to get that maybe they just don't try. And the tests have been restrictive as far as the state health lab, but for your doctor and your health system, it's not hard at all, and it's there. So that's thing one. Thing two is they think maybe just not that many people get sick with a serious respiratory disease or infection each day where they say, oh man, maybe I've got COVID. I need to go check. So those two things they think result in a lot of these unused tests.
Okay. And then how much are our epidemiologists and our experts that we keep kind of checking back with, they're focusing on this is one of many factors, right, that kind of needs to fall into place here?
Yeah, so there's a number of boxes to check. And I think that, honestly, you've got to say this box has been checked, this testing box. But they're also saying, look, we need, this contact tracing so that if you start to open things up and something flares up, can you bring in a team to do the testing really fast, figure out who else is infected, and stop it right there? That's going to be a big thing. With different industries, can you have people come back and still socially distance? In the restaurants, what's that going to look like? Do you have plexiglass between the tables? So there's a lot there still to be figured out, and I think those are some of the other pieces they're still working on.
Yeah, complicated for sure, and Pat, you said it, fascinating. Pat Dorisforth, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right, now to our big story tonight. It is not related to the virus. Basically, generally, we know how our court system works, right? I mean, we've seen it on TV at least. A defendant has the right to be tried by a jury of his or her peers, which seems simple enough, but in Oregon, things are a little different. A person can actually be convicted in a serious criminal case, and not everyone on the jury has to agree. And Oregon, by the way, is the only state like that. Well, today, the U.S. Supreme Court had something to say about it. Here's Kyle Bowie.
The U.S. Supreme Court made a monumental decision that will impact every courtroom in the state of Oregon by banning non-unanimous jury verdicts. Prior to Monday's ruling, Oregon was the only state that allowed juries to be divided. In every other state, a felony criminal conviction required a unanimous verdict. But in Oregon, a defendant could still be convicted if one or two jurors disagreed with the rest of the jury.
How do you prove beyond a reasonable doubt if one or two people don't even agree?
Alyssa Kaplan, director of the Criminal Justice Reform Clinic, explained the Oregon law approved in 1934 had its roots in racial prejudice by allowing white jurors to make the votes of a few minorities meaningless.
When it became a different kind of issue, not just legally, but historically, I think it caused a lot of people to really rethink it in a different way or consider it.
There's widespread agreement among defense lawyers and prosecutors in Oregon that the law was deeply flawed and may have sent innocent people to prison.
It should have been changed a long, long time ago.
Brad Holbrook spent more than 6 years in prison before his case was overturned. He was wrongly convicted by a non-unanimous jury.
It's extremely frustrating. I mean, it's, anybody who gets convicted of less than unanimous jury verdict, in my mind, is not convicted.
The ruling will immediately affect all cases going forward, including defendants whose appeals are still working their way through the courts. What's not clear, what will happen to thousands of old cases where defendants were convicted by a split jury. Previously, Oregon's Attorney General had warned that striking down non-unanimous verdicts could require new trials in hundreds, if not thousands of cases. NBC News correspondent Pete Williams covers the Supreme Court.
So for people who were previously convicted and their cases closed, they'll now have to go back to court and seek to reopen their cases. And it's not a settled question whether a Supreme Court decision like this applies retroactively. You would think it would, but usually it doesn't.
Oregon's Attorney General, along with prosecutors, defense lawyers, and civil rights advocates, called the Supreme Court decision good news, an important change to the state's unusual split verdict system.
All right, so let's bring in Kyle Bowie now. And Kyle, I mean, for obvious reasons, our focus has been on Oregon, but this actually stems from a Louisiana case.
Right. This case actually focuses on a Louisiana man who was facing a life sentence after being convicted by a jury on a 10-2 count. At the time, Louisiana and Oregon were the only states in the country that allowed for a split verdict. Then it went to the U.S. Supreme Court. In the meantime, Louisiana changed its law. So by the time that the U.S. Supreme Court offered an opinion on this, it only applied to Oregon.
Wow. All right. And all this time, I mean, prosecutors and defense attorneys have agreed that this law should change. So what took so long?
Yeah, this issue actually came before the state legislature just last year and had strong support from both prosecutors and the defense. Ultimately, after some debate and hopes of sending it to the voters, it died in the Senate.
All right. Kyle Aboshi for us. Kyle, thank you very much. A lot of critics say Oregon's non-unanimous jury law is a holdover from Jim Crow-era racism. So how did we get here? Well, we've got to go all the way back to 1933 when a Jewish man named Jacob Silverman faced murder charges in Oregon. 11 jurors were ready to convict, but one wasn't. So, as a kind of compromise, they convicted Silverman on manslaughter instead of murder, and he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. A lot of people thought his sentence was too light, including the editorial board of the Morning Oregonian. In November 1933, they published a, frankly, racist editorial. They wrote, "This newspaper's opinion is that the increased urbanization of American life and the vast immigration into America from Southern and Eastern Europe of people untrained in the jury system have combined to make the jury of 12 increasingly unwieldy and unsatisfactory." Oregon lawmakers heard the outrage, and a special election was held a year later in 1934. Voters approved a change in the Constitution, making it so only 10 out of 12 were needed to convict somebody, except in cases of first-degree murder. That still needed to be unanimous. Supporters have since framed it as a way of reducing congestion in the courts and saving tax dollars. And that's how we got here. It's safe to say most of us here in Portland are coffee addicts, but you're probably relying less and less on Starbucks these days, or on any coffee shop. And hold on a second, Michael Jordan could have been a Blazer?
I could have been a contender.
No, we said Blazer. You know what? We'll clear it up and relive a painful piece of Portland's past when the story continues. Hey, welcome back, guys. So again, I know I'm not Dan, but obviously keep using the hashtag HeyDan on Twitter with your thoughts about the show so far. Any questions you may have, we read everything. And maybe you have questions about this next segment. It's one of our favorite segments about our favorite vices. That's right. It's time for another edition of Vice News. It's like an after-school special after dark. All right, first vice, coffee. Because lockdown or no lockdown, it is really hard to picture life without it. And local coffee shops are making sure, thankfully, that we don't have to, even though that means some big changes on their part. Portland-based Cova Coffee has shut down 2 of its 3 Portland cafes, and the remaining open one is serving takeout only. And like many these days, they're also getting into the delivery service and their online sales. So for James Hull, who owns Local Roast & Co., his customers are now mainly in grocery stores.
So instead of providing someone with 50 or 100 pounds of coffee, we're providing somebody with 20 or 30 12-ounce bags of coffee at a time. So it's a lot more work, but I'm definitely not complaining.
Yeah, and actually you're not going to find your favorite coffee roasters complaining, at least not to us on camera, because they tell us they're grateful to still be able to serve you with your favorite cup of joe. And, you know, we're grateful to them, too. All right, our next vice has to do with a celebrity couple that you might recognize from That 70s Show. It took me the longest time to figure out what those scenes were. All right, we know it's 420, but we're actually not talking about pot right now. We're talking about wine, which none of us have been drinking more of in quarantine. All of us have. Well, there's actually something now called quarantine wine, so it makes it better, and it's made from Oregon grapes.
Hey guys.
Hi.
We are launching quarantine wine.
100%, that's right, 100% of the profits will go to a handful of charities that we have vetted for you and are so proud of during this time. Anything from feeding families that have fallen on hard times to supplying
PPE to frontline medical workers, to helping small businesses and people that are in distress.
We love that idea. So Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, they're partnered with a winemaker from Battle Creek Vineyards outside of Salem to create the Pinot Noir, and they're selling it through the Knocking Point Wine Club outside of Walla Walla. It's $50 to get 2 bottles delivered, and they're going to start shipping them in May, but you can buy them now. Again, as they said, all of the profits go to help frontline medical workers, food banks, and others really impacted by the pandemic. More info, by the way, on our website.
Hey everybody, I'm Matt Safino. In the weather story today, we are going to talk about wildlife and how they are taking advantage of empty spaces during the coronavirus outbreak. Our first stop is Thailand, and the beaches of Thailand. That's right, baby sea turtles have really benefited from the lack of tourists on the beach. They're seeing a record number of baby leatherback sea turtles hatching as the country's popular tourist beaches are basically undisturbed during the outbreak of the coronavirus. Now, the director of the local Marine Biological Center that since November, they have found 11 nests. That's the highest number in 20 years. They found 84 hatchlings as they monitor eggs for the last couple of months there. It's really unbelievable how many, and they're so cute. Look at these guys. They lay their eggs, the leatherback turtles do, in the dark without movement, which is rare when there are tourists slathered all over the beaches of Thailand, which are beautiful, of course. And unfortunately, people also take the eggs for consumption. That's a delicacy in some cultures. So the number of tourists in Thailand has diminished since by 50% since February. And the country has basically said, no commercial passenger flights coming into Thailand until the end of this month, till the end of April. Now, it's not just Thailand. I'm going to take you to Yosemite National Park, or at least a picture of wildlife from Yosemite National Park. This is the very rare Sierra red fox, which has been seen in Yosemite along with lots of other wildlife. In the park itself, they're seeing bear and bobcat, cougar, deer, everything is just coming out because there's no people there. It's really quite amazing. Now, I searched and searched, couldn't find any reports or data on that for Oregon, but there's Oregon's iconic Crater Lake National Park. The weather data is missing, but again, a beautiful day down there. So one benefit, I guess, of the coronavirus is to wildlife. They're saying, hey, we got space, there's no people around, we're coming back out. Maggie, back to you.
Matt, I love that benefit. That is awesome. I mean, like you said, we're seeing examples across the country. So keep on bringing them on, Matt. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I love that music. All right, Portland, it's time for a trip inside the KGW Vault. It's a segment that we all know and love, which today will focus on something that we all hate and would like to forget. See what I did there? Took a dark turn. All right, NBA fans put their coronavirus woes aside last night for the premiere of The Last Dance, ESPN's 10-part documentary on the career and in particular the last spectacular season of Bulls basketball and just plain planet Earth legend Michael Jordan. The first 2 episodes aired last night, ESPN moving that debut up a few months because we're all stuck at home and need something to cling to. It was so great to watch. I mean, for obvious reasons, okay? Jordan is spectacular. He's iconic. He's like an otherworldly kind of athlete. People laughed. They cheered. They lived on Twitter. But if you live in Portland, this documentary opens up a painful memory of the 1984 NBA draft when the Portland Trail Blazers had the chance to bring the North Carolina guard and future superstar on board. But they passed on him for center Sam Bowie. Cue the archive footage. What? Oh no, nope, we don't have any archive footage. And that is because, per our quote of the day, Bowie turned out to be perhaps the biggest bust in NBA history, spending a great deal of his career on the injured list and never meeting expectations. That from Bleacher Report. Awesome. Yep, Michael Jordan was the 3rd pick actually that year because Houston also needed a center and also passed. That hurts. Well, looking at Twitter last night, Blazers Nation did not cope well with the reopening of this old wound. Brenna Green, actually from our sister station in Spokane, tweeting, "Can we just skip this part, please?" John also tweeting, "I've done some stupid things, but never have I picked Sam Bowie over Michael Jordan." Finally, Ryan tweeted about what could have been. Clyde and MJ together. Lots of rings, Rip City. Which brings us to, there's the KGW archive footage we'd all like to cling to in this vulnerable moment. Look, guys, it's Clyde. Clyde Drexler, we love him. He makes us so happy. Shooting guard, small forward, 10-time NBA All-Star. Portland had him at the time, and they didn't feel, as a result, as much of a need to pick up Jordan as much as they needed to pick up a center. Now, a little personal note here. I grew up in Illinois, and I loved the Bulls. I had a Michael Jordan jersey. It was black. It was pinstriped, the whole nine. It was sick. I asked my mom to send me proof of it, but instead, she sent me this awkward 90s classic rec league gem. And she also sent me pictures from the Michael Jordan restaurant in Chicago, where they apparently sold kids nothing but net burgers, center court cheese, gotta get that right, and pro PB&J. And yes, I saved that menu because, as you can tell from this photo, my social life was going great. All this to say, I hurt for Portland, but channeling that little girl in my deep core, I am at peace with Jordan's having gone to the Bulls. I'm so sorry, guys. And Mom, thank you for the horrible photos. One final note, by the way, for those who watch The Last Dance, when I say I'm from Illinois, I mean I'm from Peoria, Illinois, a city that, according to Michael Jordan in that documentary, hosted some parties with some activities. And people from back home, who I went to high school with, are trying to figure out which hotel he was talking about. Regardless, I guess, thanks for visiting Peoria. All right, we're going to finish the story when we come back. Hey, welcome back, guys. So, I mean, it's a hard truth, but if you have concert tickets for basically anything in the next few months, or any kind of tickets, it's probably canceled. And a lot of us are really missing live music and dancing right now. But thanks to the wonders of technology, a Portland area musician got to play for people all around the world this weekend. So we're going to leave you with this awesome recap from Christine Pitawanich. Have a great night, y'all.
With the strum of his guitar, Dante Zapata gets people moving to his music.
You've got your spell on me, baby. Stop messing around with the tricks. Sing anything from soul music to country music to R&B, jazz, blues.
He's a Portland area musician accustomed to playing live music for small gatherings at wineries and events with dancers of all genres. Then COVID-19 hit.
I think life has changed for everybody, but for musicians especially.
But this weekend, he had the opportunity to play for hundreds of people all over the world.
This is the first time I've actually done something online like this.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Earth Virtual Milonga number 2. Yes.
That's Elisaveta Nersesva, a tango dancer and instructor in LA who, by the way, also used to dance in Portland some years back. She organized a virtual tango event called Earth Virtual Milonga.
And milonga is just basically a name for an event where people get together to dance tango.
This weekend was the second one she's thrown.
We have somebody from Thessalonica, from Paris, from Germany, from England, from Crete, from Geneva, Bulgaria, Spain. I mean, we're really covering the globe here. The whole idea was just like, okay, we might be isolated right now, but we're not alone. We're here, we're together, we're around the world choosing to be together.
Some people had dance partners, others had stuffed animals, and it was all good.
What do you hope people get from coming to this event?
Well, my first hope is that people feel better, you know, that they get a dose of joy in their life.
Making lemons into lemonade for hundreds of people everywhere.
If you can talk, you can sing. If you can walk, you can dance. A lovely day.
So whether you feel like dancing with a person or a pillow, don't worry, you didn't miss out, because the next Earth Virtual Milonga event is in a couple of weeks. We've got the information on our KGW website. Or if you don't dance, the organizer says that's okay. Tune in if you're bored, because you just might catch the bug. Christine Pitawanich, KGW News.